Hello, and welcome to another edition of Humble Theology. My name is John, and in these particular lessons or videos, we're looking at the Westminster Confession of Faith. Currently, we're in chapter 5, dealing with God's providence, and we're now looking at section 4. Section 4, to me, again, just kind of giving a little bit of commentary as we read through these. 1 through 3, 1 talks about God being in his providence, in control of all things. 2 talks about that God does these things according to his wisdom, power, and not just his foreknowledge, but that basically he's the first cause of all things, but allows things via second causes to kind of fall into sin or whatever else. But he's not the agent then of sin, or barely just giving permission for things. Section 3 that we looked at last week talked about the means that God uses. God uses means to accomplish different things, and he is free to work above them and without them and against them and things like that. So I encourage you to go look at those. Section 4 for this week, we're going to read it first, then we'll talk about it. But to me, section 4 is a summary of 1 through 3, but it's piecing them together in the context of when we look at man and angels and their fall, and how do we look at the fall of man, how do we even look at salvation and all that kind of stuff. So let's look at section 4, and then we'll kind of dissect it a little bit. So 4 says, the almighty power, unsearchable wisdom, and infinite goodness of God so far manifest themselves in his providence that it extends itself even to the first fall, to all other sins of men, angels and men, and that not by a bare permission, but such as has joined with it a most wise and powerful bounding and otherwise ordering and governing of them in a manifold dispensation to his own holy ends. Yet so as the sinfulness thereof proceeds only from the creature and not from God, who being most holy and righteous is neither is, nor can be the author or approver of sin. So again, this kind of combines everything we had from chapter 5, sections 1, 2, and 3. So let's start off. The almighty power, unsearchable wisdom, infinite goodness of God. So that's our starting point, or that should always be our starting point, is the character, person, attributes of God. He is the one who is all powerful, all wise, all knowing, and he does everything within the bounds of his infinite goodness. So when we look at these things, and you look at the scripture references, and I try to include those so people, you can pause the video, go back, read, do your own Bible study, read the scripture references that the Westminster preachers, pastors, and elders provided. Look them up to see that these things are in scripture. And as you do, even if you disagree with them, you're not to take those things that, well, then this makes God a monster. Because then what? Well, then you've become the one who's all-powerful, because you're now asserting your authority above that of Scripture. Wisdom, you say you know better than what we're finding or what they found in Scripture. And the goodness of God, you're throwing that aside. Well, then God's character, if these things in Scripture are true, then God's character is maligned. And who are you to judge that? So it's a careful reference point that anytime you're looking at Scripture, if there's a deficiency in our understanding, that's on us, humanity. Like when we say, I can't totally grasp the Trinity, well, it doesn't mean that, it doesn't make sense and therefore God cannot be triune. We're just saying God is triune. He's described himself within the limitations of language and knowledge that we have. But can't wrap my mind around it. I don't understand what that means to be 3 and 1, and how each of those persons can be distinct and yet of one essence. it's beyond what my singleness as an individual person can be versus God as a triune being can be, which again is kind of what makes him God. Okay, so when we hold the character and person of God intact and we approach providence, we have to realize that, as we said in 1, that he must be then in control of all things. If he's in control of all things, then that extended itself even to the fall of men and angels. And we can't just say, well, he permitted it, or these creatures did it by their own free will, or whatever. It's like that may be the means, and that may be what we call second causes, going back to section 2. But you can't say it happened against the will and plan of God. If it happened, and it's according to God's goodwill, purpose, and intentions in some way in which it works itself out. So that's where it gets into this. It's not by bare permission. It has his most wise, powerful bounding, ordering, governing. It mentions manifold dispensations. Well, within covenant theology, we have dispensations. Dispensations, they usually have covenants. But what it's referencing here is within the different ages of how it's appearing God works with people, with certain families and a national aspect, and then obviously within just a world aspect as the gospel disseminates throughout the world. How he's working, it's kind of like your home. You run your home differently in the summertime and have different rules in the summertime than you do in the winter. Certain temperatures are maintained differently. Window, door protocols, things like that are different. Clothing, what you would wear in the winter versus summer, is different. But it doesn't mean your house has changed or that you have changed. You're still the same. But what's going on as far as the rules within the context of the season has changed a bit. Again, this is just an illustration. It tries to do justice to the idea of dispensation, but let me know in the comments if you have a better one. But what he's saying is that all these things work to his own holy ends. Yet so the sinfulness that proceeds from the creatures, so men and angels that sin, are from them. Again, the idea of second causes and the use of means. God is most holy and most righteous, and that by him having these things in the world doesn't make him the approver of sin or the author of sin. Those things belong to the fallen man, fallen angels. We're the ones who basically bring sin into the world and all this stuff. So again, it's a little difficult, and some people get a lot of this stuff twisted around. That's why the confession is trying to help us understand this. We have a couple more sections to go, so this isn't the end-all thing here. This is only section 4, chapter 5. But as we work through this, keep in mind the holy and righteous good intentions and character of God, that he's bringing things to his holy ends. And sometimes those holy ends involve salvation. Sometimes they involve his justice and judgment. So again, kind of a Romans 9 aspect there. We have to be careful. Who are we to answer back to God when we don't understand something, or we think something is beyond or should have been done differently? The clay doesn't have, the creature doesn't have the right to go back to the Creator and say, well, what were you doing here? What do you think about how you did this? I would have done it differently. Again, this is to go against the character of God. We make ourselves the one in authority. We think we're more wise than God is, and then we absolutely malign his goodness. So that's section 4. Thank you for listening. I'm trying to keep it short. We're still at about almost 10 minutes. So thank you for listening. We'll see you again next time. God bless. Take care.